Hi, this is Shana Meyerson with YOGAthletica in Los Angeles, California, here today to teach you how to do Ekapada Koundinyasana number 2. What's Ekapada Koundinyasana number 2? It's sort of like a splitty arm balance. And it's a little bit weird that this is number 2 because number 1 is actually the one in a twist, which makes no sense at all. If I were like the guy who invented yoga or the girl, I definitely would have made the twist number 2 and the neutral number 1. But turns out, yes, I didn't invent yoga. I know that might come as a shock to some of you. So therefore, this is Ekapada Koundinyasana number 2. I'm going to give you 2 warm-up exercises and then we'll get into sort of the technical aspects of the posture. Okay. First warm-up exercise. In order to do this pose, you have to be able to get your leg to your arm. We're going to do it today from down dog because it tends to be a more accessible entry point. So, starting off in your downward facing dog, you're going to take a leg. I'll call it my left leg in this scenario. It doesn't really matter which leg. And the first thing you need to do is bend your knee and rotate it outwards. Okay, so your knee is not going to go forward, it's going to go out to the side. Now, I move way forward with my shoulders, so my shoulders go over my wrist, and just see if I can touch my knee to my triceps. Okay, not my wrist, my triceps. And you can see that when I do this, I've got a lot of connection in my core to make sure I don't just fall down to the floor. This is going to be super important when we come into our arm balance because falling to the floor, as it turns out, is the arch nemesis of balancing in an arm balance or really balancing at all on anything. So, lots of engagement in the core. My leg comes up, I rotate it out, knee to triceps, way up high, and back. Now, taking a little bit deeper, just to get the understanding of how to start moving with the leg on the arm, because a lot of people, they get their leg to their arm, but as soon as they start moving, it's like their leg just totally disappears. So I want you to really establish this connection. If you need crazy glue, get crazy glue, but keep your shin on your arm, comme ça. Leg comes up, I bring it in, and we're going to lower halfway down, all the way up, and back. So what I see very often, let me do the other side. I bring it in, lower down, bring it up, and back. A lot of people who struggle to come forward, they come here, and then when they lower down, their leg comes off and they just collapse to the floor. Remember that every pose in yoga is a whole body pose. So just because this involves my arms, it's an arm balance, does not mean that the rest of me is not fully involved and vested in this pose. So lots of engagement all the way down my body, from my shoulders all the way to my leg. Okay? If you want to build even more strength than that, take your leg, pull it in, lower halfway, and step back. Press up, and switch sides. So moving back from the Chaturanga Dandasana, which is that halfway down point, is going to really teach you how to keep that core fully engaged. Okay? That's your first warm-up. Just working into that hip joint and making sure you could at least get the leg to the arm. So if you can't get the leg to the arm, you can't balance on your arm with your leg. Make sense? Okay, second exercise. And this may look familiar to some of you. If you watched my last video, it will definitely look familiar to you because I put it in my last video. From your down dog, lift up the leg, come about halfway forward, so not all the way forward. You're going to take that leg and bend it as if you were going to touch your foot to your head, which you're not. Now, on this one, I'm going to shift so far forward. Put my chin on the floor and just point forward and roll out into my cobra. Okay? Now, we did this one in the Koundinyasana being the chin balance. Because chin balance and the Koundinyasana are almost the same pose and very, very, very many similarities. I'll come back to that, cycle back at the end of the video. So, again, my leg comes up, halfway forward, bend your knee like you're going to touch your head, go way forward, try to get your chin way past your hands, point, and roll. Okay, now, why are these things important? Because in Koundinyasana, there are 3 mistakes that people tend to make. So I want you to watch the mistakes and see if you can see how the mistakes are going to hinder my pose. Check this out. The first mistake, people collapse their hip, which is really usually a function of collapsing their shoulder. But I want you to look at my hip and then tell me, well, you don't actually have to tell me because I'm not real. I mean, I'm real, but I'm in a video, and if you talk to me, I won't be able to hear you. So you don't actually have to tell me, but just think in your head, where is the momentum of this pose? So, if I were to come forward, like we did in our first exercise, and bring my leg in, and then drop my hip down, which is what most people are doing, which direction is my momentum? Now you can see my hips are slanting towards you. They're slanting this way. So if my body weight is slanting this way, is my momentum up or is my momentum down? Okay. I hope that was like an easy question for you. If I'm slanting down, my momentum is down, it's going to be really hard for me to lift that leg. From another angle, let's do this. My leg comes in. Again, this is what most people do. And it's a function of collapsing my shoulder, but now I'm going to show you what happens when I try to get my leg off the floor. Not that successful, right? Because, again, momentum is shifting down. So the first thing you need to be thinking about when you're coming into your Koundinyasana is that both hips need to be lifted, okay? Second thing is the fact that people get very confused about the fact that this is actually a back bend. People understand back bends when they're lying on their back, right? Like a bridge or a full wheel. People understand back bends when they're on their knees, say a camel. People even understand back bends on their hands, like a scorpion. But there's something about an arm balance that people get very, very confused about the back bending action. So when you come into this pose, remember this is a back bend, which means that the chest is melting and the tailbone lifting. Okay? So pretty much in all my arm balances, I have 2 choices with my spine. Either I'm in a cat, like say a crow has a lot of cat energy in it, or I'm a cow, a back bend. Most are cows. But what people do is they lower down in the cat pose, right? So they're arcing down like this. I'm going to show you that now, and I want you to again visualize, and you don't have to tell me, but think in your head, which way is the momentum of this pose? Is it going to force my leg down, or is it going to encourage it up? So, I come into my pose. Here's my cat. I lower down. Where's my momentum? Can you see that? If I'm arching like this, is my momentum up or is it down? Answer, down. When I round my spine like this, the tendency is going to be for my foot to plunge into the floor. Okay? Not exactly what I'm looking for in an arm balance. I want my foot to float off the floor, not plunge to the floor. So again, if I come down, now I'm going to try to get my foot off the floor. I know it looks like I'm being dramatic. You know I'm never dramatic, right? You're going to take this in. Here's my round spine. leg is not going anywhere, okay? So I need to be coming in with an arched spine, with a back bend. So when I come in with the back bend, with the chest low and the leg high, you'll see that the leg is naturally going to float. But we'll save all that excitement for later, because let me tell you the third mistake that people make. The third mistake is this. It's the teeter-totter effect, okay? Remember when you were a kid and you're on a teeter-totter, a seesaw, and the really big heavy kid jumps onto one side, right? What happens to you? You fly across the playground, right? Because it's very heavy on one side, so it's gonna get very light on the other side, and boop, you're gone, okay? Hopefully you didn't actually fly across the playground, but you do shoot way up into the air, right? So it's the same concept that plays in here. I have something very heavy behind me. I'm gonna call it a leg, because it's a leg. And my butt. My butt's pretty heavy. Your butt's heavy too. All of us have heavy butts and legs. So I've got all of this behind me. The only way that I'm gonna be able to counteract that balance is by having something heavy in front of me. Now, if I don't lower very far, all I'm really gonna have is just like my shoulders and my head. So I'm gonna have to cheat this forward, try to get my head way, way forward. Because what I see again is people come in, and instead of going forward, they lower this way. Where's my momentum? Not only is it so far back, there is no way on earth that leg is floating off the floor, because when my elbows are sort of backwards and my body weight is this way, like what is there to counterbalance me? What is there to lift me up? Everything in balance is, how do I balance what's over here with what's over here? And what's here with here, and what's here with here, and I gotta find like some sort of center point, otherwise I'm never gonna balance. So, when I come into the pose the correct way, both hips are lifted. Just like I did in that second exercise, how the leg was going up and over, my tailbone was lifting up. B, I need to melt my chest. No coming in with the round spine. I'm gonna go in with a super melty spine. And C, 3, PO, I'm gonna go so far forward that you're gonna see my back leg, I never have to jump. I'm always looking for the float, because the float comes from just the weight distribution rather than from forcing myself into the pose. So, from my downward facing dog, my leg comes up, knee to triceps. Now my tendency is going to be to drop my hip, but I'm going to keep it really high and lifted. So my hip is lifted. Now I'm going to melt my chest. Instead of coming out in a round spine, I'm going to go forward and melt my chest. You can even put your chin on the floor here if you want to. Then I'm not far enough forward. I'm going to lean, 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 lean until the body weight just causes the back leg to naturally float off the floor. Did you see how there's no jump going on here? I'm just shifting my energies and I'm cheating everything up by lifting my hip, by arching my back and melting my chest, and by leaning forward. I'm just creating this seesaw and this curve that carries me easily into the pose. From a different view, leg comes up, I bring it way in. Now when I first come in, you'll see I'm in that cat pose, so I'm gonna have to reverse that into a cow. I move forward, just like I did in that warm-up exercise, melt my chest, legs high, and you finish the pose by just extending your leg out. Okay, now, I'm looking at you because you're in the camera, but you're not really in the camera, but you're on the other side. Well, you're not even on the other side of the camera. But I'm looking at you just because I'm making a video. When you're doing this, don't look at me or whatever, whoever. Look forward, always, okay? So the gaze is always forward. Okay, so when you're working this pose, really, really try to get the flow, okay? That's what we miss. When things become forceful, they become uncontrolled, and uncontrolled is unbalanced. We don't want to be unbalanced, we want to be super balanced in life. So, nice, light, easy flow. Okay, full entry, of course, is to enter with a straight leg. Now, when you come with a straight leg, the problem here is most people kick the floor. They lift their leg, they bring it out, and they come forward and they run into the floor. They can't understand. Why do I keep running into the floor? Okay? It's because you have to have a rotation in this top leg. If I'm rotating down, again, my momentum is down. Correct? So instead, my leg comes up, and I'm going to externally rotate. I'm going to turn my toes slightly up, so that when I come forward, look at my toes. They're facing up. They're not going anywhere near the floor. Again, chest mounts, and I tip into my pose. Ta-da! This is actually one of what I would consider the 3 foundational arm balances of yoga. We've got our crow, we've got our Koundinyasana, or if you want to, the Bhujagadasana, and we've got this one, Ekapada Koundinyasana number 2, which in my book should be number 1. Okay, now, I told you I'm going to cycle back, so I want you to understand how fierce chin pose, which looks like a very different pose, is actually just this pose taken to the next level. And again, I'm going to try to do this without force. I'm going to do this by melting my chest, lifting my hips, and when I lift my hips, I lift my tailbone, right? Because my tailbone is connected to my hips, so it'd be hard to separate those two. What's the other thing? Lifting my, and melt, did I say melt to my chest? I'm moving way forward, okay? So watch what happens. If I take this and I just keep going into it, remember that second exercise? I'm gonna do a quick review here. My leg came up, I came halfway, I lowered down. Now can you see all the elements of the Koundinyasana here? I'm forward, my chest is low, and my hips are high. Can you see how that has so many of the same elements? Now watch this. Excuse me. My leg comes up, and by the way, if you cheat this one a little shorter, like jump your foot in, it will make it a lot easier because you won't have to shift so far forward. I'm going to come in with my leg, I'll come in with the full pose, big rotation. As I come in, I melt my chest, but watch this. Ta-da! You see how one melts right into the other, and you see how little effort goes into this. This is my ultimate goal. I want my yoga to be easy. I want it to be simple, and I want it to be safe. If you feel like you're forcing yourself into this pose, step back a little bit. Use these 3 things. It's a back bend. Melt your chest. Make sure your tailbone is lifting, and make sure you're leaning way forward. Try to get your chin past your mat. Bring it that far forward so that you teeter-totter yourself, and just a simple balance of power takes you into the pose. This is Shana Meyerson with YOGAthletica in Los Angeles, California, wishing you an awesome week.